You are LockedOn Braves POSTCAST, part of LockedOn Sports Atlanta, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Braves POSTCAST. Grant McAuley alongside Jake Mastroianni after a much better day of baseball for the Atlanta Braves, who were able to avoid a sweep in their longest losing streak since 2017 and maybe, just maybe, have shown some signs of life offensively and brought a little bit of momentum home for a 6-game homestand that's ahead. We're going to talk about that win, all the guys that helped that happen, and, of course, get you set for that homestand, which begins this weekend as well. Before we get started, as always, the LockedOn Braves POSTCAST is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hit that thumbs up button, subscribe as well to Locked On Sports Atlanta here on YouTube and to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by Tax Network USA. You know, it's never too late to resolve your tax issues with the IRS, so don't wait. Reduce your tax debt and get help from a team of licensed tax professionals. Call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. Well, Jake, we knew that the Braves road trip was not going to be the way that they envisioned it when it started. But if there was any way to kind of pull the nose up at the end and perhaps avoid a sweep and do all of that in the process and bring just a little bit of momentum back to Truist Park, I would say they checked a few boxes and doing a few different things that we haven't seen enough of in 2024.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, we obviously don't talk about must wins this time of year, but to end your longest losing streak since 2017 and to end the road trip on a good note as you come home, and that certainly helps and hopefully can get this team going. We're looking for anything. Again, we're going to need to see some long stretches of games like this, but glad to at least avoid the sweep and, like I said, get a win to end that road trip.
Yeah, the Braves were able to set the tone early offensively. I want to underline that a couple of times and maybe highlight it with whatever your favorite color is, because that's just not something we've seen a lot of. And then they were also able to add on while getting a really great start from Reynaldo Lopez and hold on for a 6-3 victory over the Baltimore Orioles. The scoring got started in that first inning when Marcell Ozuna and who else put the Braves out on top. I know they've scored first quite a few times over the course of this, string of bad games, I guess you could call it, offensively speaking, that has gone on for going on 6 or 7 weeks. But it just feels like maybe they score early, then they don't score again. But, Jake, this was a very different kind of game for Atlanta in grabbing the early lead, giving Reynaldo Lopez something to work with, adding on a little bit. And then when the Orioles did finally get close, the Braves were able to answer with those all too valuable insurance runs.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Braves baseball that you want to see, score early, score often, the other team fights back and you just build on that lead. Great pitching. It's what you want to see. It's what you hope to see more of going forward. But, the first inning runs, it feels like there's been a lot of opportunities in first innings. Obviously, you had the leadoff triple the other night, not able to cash that in. When Acuna was healthy, I felt like he was getting on base a lot in the first inning and just weren't able to score then. So, even throughout this elongated stretch now, that we're a month and a half, 2 months, I feel like there's been opportunities in that first inning. Maybe they score one, but they don't really put up that crooked number in the first inning a lot like we saw last year. So that was a great sign to be able to do it. To be able to do it in the first 3 hitters of the game is obviously great. Would love to see more of that, just putting that pressure early on. And, a pitcher's got to pitch and do his job, but I do think it helps relax things and relax everybody, both pitchers and hitters, when you can get a couple runs early. But like you said, just that ability to not let that be it. And there were opportunities after that. They weren't able to cash in until later on in the game. But again, not to let that just be it and to be able to score throughout. That's really what you're looking for this offense to do.
Yeah, and, they got that home run from Matt Olson that it felt like maybe would be the start of something. Then, of course, the Orioles have their own answer for that, and the Braves, unfortunately, were unable to pick up the win in the middle game of this. And it's worth saying, and I know that this may not really make anybody feel better about this offense, and we really kind of touched on it in yesterday's show. There have been times throughout the course of this long stretch of just substandard play for the Atlanta Braves where it's a hit here or a hit there, a run here, a run there. It's not about hitting 307 home runs in the course of a season, but Jake, some timely hitting would have gone a long way to help the Braves maybe be a 500 team over the stretch or a little bit better if they could cash in on those aforementioned opportunities you talked about. And one guy who always seems to cash in, or at least more times than not, is Marcell Ozuna. So let me ask you a rhetorical question, but actually have an answer for it. Are you surprised anymore that it's Marcell in the middle of things going well for the Braves when it comes to scoring runs?
Yeah, it's not at this point. Like I talked about the Braves offense in general. I'm going to need to see long stretches of it. Well, we've seen long stretch of Marcell Ozuna now and the player that he is, and their promo campaign for the All-Star game. You got to get the Big Bear to
Yeah.
Texas because he certainly deserves it. The way that he's been playing, and again, the way he's been playing for over a year now, since the beginning of last May. It's not hyperbole. It's not an exaggeration. He's been one of the best hitters in baseball over that stretch. And we say it all the time, don't know where this offense would be without him. And he comes up big again, getting those 2 RBIs in the first inning.
Yeah, I mean, he's just the guy you want up there right now and back up in the number 3 spot where he's been for most of the last, 3, maybe 4 weeks now at this point, and just continuing to drive in runs for this club. And that's a great spot for him. It's also great when the guy batting in front of him has 4 hits on the day. How about Ozzy Albies? I mean, I know that he's had some stretches this year where he's been very good. He's also been like a lot of other Braves hitters and gone through the valleys, the cold stretches, whatever you want to call them. But he has picked a good day to go ahead and get himself on base, and Michael Harris did as well with a couple of runs scored. It's great to see the top 2 guys setting that table because we haven't seen as much of that this year as we might have expected to or have become accustomed to by having such a dynamic leadoff hitter, and typically in Ozzy Albies, a pretty good number 2 guy as well.
Yeah, I mean, with Acuna out, we've talked about it. They're going to have to find other ways to score runs, and a lot of it's going to be dependent on Michael Harris and Ozzy Albies. And they're the 2 guys that can get on and they can score from first. We saw Jared Kelenic do it as well. He has that ability, but there's just very few guys now in this lineup that, can get on the bases and make things happen and help create runs. But those are 2 of those guys. So if you can get them going at the top of the lineup like they were on this day, it's just going to help with Ozuna. And we talked yesterday about Matt Olson and how he's been swinging the bat well for a while now. So you can get those 2 on at the top in front of Ozuna, in front of Olson, guys who, again, have been hitting for a while, Marcell even more so. Then you feel a lot better about this team being able to just generate some offense, not having to rely on the home run. 6 runs today, no home runs.
Yep.
And we don't see that a lot from this Braves team. Now, I'll take the home runs, certainly. You want to hit some 2-run, 3-run homers, we'll take them. But it's nice to be able to see a game where they didn't have to be dependent on it. And they were able to score in different ways and manufacture runs. So that's huge. But again, yes, if the Braves are going to have any type of big success going forward, you're not going to replace Acuna and what he can do at the top. But certainly anytime Michael and Ozzy get on, you're going to have to hope that they can try to manufacture something, to steal a base, to get in, score on a ball in the gap from first. And those are 2 of the guys in this lineup that can do that for you.
Yeah, and I feel like Michael Harris is a pretty nice stolen base threat. I mean, if you look at the first couple of years of his career, I mean, clearly he, feels pretty confident running the bases as well. His stolen base percentage has been pretty good. Maybe we'll see him start to run a little bit more as this year wears on, but not to get lost on one of those tangents. But I think we have seen, both with how the Braves are attacking it and maybe some of the other teams across baseball, clubs did their homework in trying to figure out what they could do to perhaps keep stolen bases from being such a huge factor as they were a year ago when the pitcher disengagements were limited. And obviously that was designed to get maybe the running game going a bit. But it does seem like that has changed at least a little bit in watching the Braves. But of course, not having Ronald Acuna Jr. out there also changes the dynamics of stolen bases for the Braves.
It does. And, Ronald's that guy. He's got the green light every time he wants to go. And, I think a lot of other guys in the lineup don't run because you don't want to miss a 2 or 3 run homer because you know what this lineup can do when it's going. But again, it's not going right now. You're not getting those 2 or 3 run homers. So you might have to be a little bit more aggressive. And we've seen other teams do it against us. Teams like the Nationals that don't have a lot of power, they're able to manufacture runs and steal some bases. You're about to face a team in the Rays who do that as well. So it's all kind of just dependent on your lineup and how it's built and structured, whether or not you can take advantage of that. But you're seeing more teams do it than others. But again, this Braves lineup, there's just not that many guys up and down. I mean, Riley's not going to be a stolen base threat. Ozuna, Olson, Duvall, there's just guys in the middle there that aren't going to be able to do that for you. So that's why I think it's even more important for those guys who can. If they feel comfortable and do it, you certainly don't want to run into any outs. I think it's, could be an advantage for them.
Yeah, and you just, like you said, maybe want to pick your spots a little bit. But guys like Harris and probably to an extent Jared Kelenic as well, you feel pretty good about the way those guys run the bases. And Ozzy, he kind of picks and chooses his spots. I always thought he was going to be that 30-plus stolen base perennial, kind of guy, but he became a 30-plus homer perennial hitter. So there is that. You'll make that trade-off where you need to. Let's talk a little bit more about Michael Harris, though, for a second, because while Raisel Iglesias has a busy 9th inning for the Braves, he got his 17th save. I think maybe Michael Harris should get the save for what he did, making a great catch that helped Iglesias get out of some trouble as the Orioles were trying to give their fans a finish in the finale at Camden Yards.
Yeah, great play by Michael Harris. Had a great play by Jared Kelenic earlier. He kind of misread one off the bat, and he was able to run in, make a good diving catch. So some good outfield defense in this one. But, Michael Harris, he does a fantastic job always. Always felt like he's better going back on baseballs. Coming in is where I think maybe he's still very good. But one area that I've seen kind of early on in his career where maybe he's just not as great. But I've seen it this year, certainly. I think he's gotten much better in that. And again, he's a future Gold Glover, if not this year. At some point, you feel like he's going to win one, and you just know when a ball's hit to center field, it's just when he doesn't catch it is when you really notice, because that's just how good he is.
Yep, he is that good, that dependable, and the Braves are very happy to have him out there in center field. We've also been happy to have Reynaldo Lopez out on the mound about every fifth or sixth day this year, depending on how they have stretched that out. But Reynaldo has been terrific. We got to talk about him and some more of the highlights from the Braves' 6-3 win over the Orioles as the Braves postcast continues. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch all your favorite sports and players. Baseball season is fastly approaching the All-Star break, but don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond to your Prize Picks entries. Just take your pick of whatever stats you like, click more or less, and add them to that Prize Picks entry today. Download the app, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. That is LOCKEDONMLB on the Prize Picks app. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million worth of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams, and Policy Genius helps you compare your options from those top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help talk you through that process. Easily compare quotes from America's top insurers with just a few clicks to find your lowest price. Policy Genius gives you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team and has thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their need. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedon and get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That is policygenius.com/lockedonmlb. Well, Jake, let's get inside the line score and box score of this game, which was a pretty good one by most accounts. And as we talked about, the Braves were able to do a little bit of adding on throughout this one. Couple of runs in the first, one in the fourth, one in the sixth, two in the ninth. What's that add up to? 6 runs for the Braves on 12 hits, no errors. They did leave 10 men on base. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Orioles with 3 runs on 6 hits, made a couple of errors, and one of those proved costly in the ninth inning as well. But the Braves will be happy to cash in on your charity. Thank you very much. And they did that in their 2-run ninth inning. The Orioles left 6 men on base in this game. It was Reynaldo Lopez picking up the win. He's 4-2. Cole Irvin takes the loss. He drops to 6-3 on the year. And Marcell Iglesias, as I mentioned, 17th save of the season. I don't want to dwell on this too much because I want to get into the Reynaldo Lopez of it all, but the Braves were 3 for 16 with runners in scoring position. So they had some opportunities, to your point, Jake. They left 10 men on base, but you still had to come away from this feeling, I think, at least a little bit encouraged that, as you've pointed out many times, you look up and down the lineup and saw a whole bunch of different guys doing some things, both at the top and the bottom. Maybe not so much right there, smack dab in the middle after Matt Olson, but you had a lot of contributions up and down. And I think that, as much as anything, the Braves have been looking for and would like to replicate as much as they can.
Certainly. I mean, we talked about it last night. It was all at the top. If you would have just gotten a little bit of anything from the bottom, maybe the Braves win that game. And today you get 2 hits from Adam Duvall, who had a good game, one of the best games he's had in quite a while. Jared Kelenic had a hit, and then he ended up scoring from first earlier when he got swapped on the base pass with Adam Duvall on a forced out. Arcia had an RBI double in the game. So you got some guys up and down the lineup. And, Riley and d'Arnaud, tough games for them, but at least they used to have a hard hit ball in there to say they at least made some good contact. But, yeah, up and down. Look, like I said, we're going to need to see long stretches. There's still things in this game that weren't perfect. You mentioned the issues with runners in scoring position. There were more opportunities in there to do more damage, and 10 strikeouts, against a guy that doesn't strike out a lot. He set his season high in strikeouts in Cole Irvin. I didn't quite hear if it was a career high, but that's still just too many strikeouts for this team, something that they've been struggling with. 8 strikeouts from Cole Irvin, a guy that's just not a strikeout pitcher. So there's some good, there's some bad in there. Obviously, we're going to try to think positively when you score 6 runs on 12 hits. You're definitely going to take that with the way things have been. But still more room to grow if you want to look at it that way. They can be even better than this.
Yeah, 9 hits as well off Irvin, who was charged with 4 runs, 3 of those earned. In fact, 2 of the 6 runs for the Braves were of the unearned variety. And of course, the error that let Michael Harris get the 9th inning started ultimately, and also thanks to a wild pitch, netted the Braves a couple of runs by the time that they were done there. Let's stick a pin in the offense for a moment, though. We haven't had too many games where we've gotten to talk a whole lot about the offense, and still, even then, we had to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of what could be better. But, I mean, that's just kind of what the job is here. But let's get into Reynaldo Lopez, who's doing his thing again. 6 scoreless innings, 2 hits, 1 walk, 8 strikeouts. That performance made Lopez MLB's ERA leader at 1.69, just like we all predicted when we heard he was going to compete for a spot in the rotation back in spring. Right, Jake?
Yeah, absolutely. We all knew he'd be the ERA leader this time of year. This is the best start all year for Reynaldo Lopez for me, because the lineup you're facing, it's a very good lineup. It is loaded with lefties. And the one thing about Lopez that I've been watching this year is, what can he do against lefties? Can he control the curveball? Can he control the changeup in order to get lefties? And he threw some amazing changeups and curveballs in this game to neutralize that left-handed lineup that they threw at him. And it wasn't just that. It's because he threw those pitches so well, the fastball played great in this one. 9 whiffs on 30 swings against that 4-seam fastball. You saw him hit 99 on that pitch late in the outing. I mean, he got better and better in this start, and it's kind of scary to say. I feel like he's getting better and better each time he goes out there, Grant. So again, I keep saying, he's going to regress at some point. Again, I don't think he's going to have a sub-2 ERA this year, but the more he goes out there, the more I see him pitch, and the more he gets comfortable with those secondaries, that curveball and changeup. I mean, I think you could see a legitimate, really good pitcher, what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I mean, and he was a big-time, a big arm and a big prospect who, of course, was traded away from the Nationals to the White Sox. They gave him the opportunity to start, and he ended up kind of being one of the lower-tier starters in the American League. I think one year he might have even led Major League Baseball, or at least the AL, in runs allowed. So you kind of wondered, once he found success in the bullpen, was he ever headed back to the starting rotation? And Lopez apparently, in communicating and negotiating with the Braves, said, hey, I'm interested. Obviously, the 3-year, $30 million deal plus a $10 million option for a 4th year. Braves felt good about getting an arm that could help them in some way, but Lopez felt strongly about wanting the opportunity to start again and that he could be successful in doing it. The Braves obliged him. They stretched him out in spring training. You kind of wondered, all right, well, is there really a competition going on here? Is this guy really going to do it? And he has. All he's done is continue to answer the questions that, yes, he is capable of throwing the innings. I know that the Braves have tried to manage that workload as much as they can just by giving him those extra days to go along throughout the year, because Alex Anthopoulos said this week, we want to proactively keep these guys as fresh as we can throughout the course of the season so that when we get to the end, they feel like they've been on a good routine, not feeling like they've been run down. I think Reynaldo is probably the poster child for this. And if there's another one, it's obviously Chris Sale, who has a long injury history, so a totally different story. But I just bring all that up to say, not only has Lopez fulfilled his end of the bargain, but I feel like the Braves have allowed him to have the proper amount of rest so that he can maintain. And that may be a big part of his success here over the first 2+ months.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to kind of quantify, but I mean, the fact that he's gotten the extra rest almost every time except for one start this year and the successes he's having, it's hard not to say that extra rest isn't contributing to the success that he's having on the field. So, it's certainly great. And you have the ability to do that. Obviously, you want to keep guys rested so that you're playing meaningful games at the second half of the season. I believe this Braves team will, even with this bad stretch that they've gone through. But could be great for Lopez, for Sale, for Fried, even, who didn't throw a lot last year. We know he's thrown a lot in the past and recently, Morton as well. I mean, especially if you're going to use some of these young guys all season. I mean, it just makes a lot of sense if you have the guys that you feel comfortable that you can do that with to deploy the 6-man rotation. We talked about that yesterday, but certainly the results, I mean, are speaking for themselves with what Lopez is doing, Sale, and the rest of them.
Yeah, I do think the 6-man rotation can be a little bit tricky, particularly when you start throwing in off days, and those do exist. The Braves did go through about 2.5 weeks of not having one, but now they've been able to reset a little bit. So that has also helped in keeping both Lopez and Sale with that extra day of rest as they line up that rotation moving forward. As far as the bullpen was concerned, Pierce Johnson ran into some 7th-inning trouble, a 3-run homer he allowed to Kyle Stowers that made this a closer game, and at that time made it a 1-run game, but the Braves were able to get those 2 ninth-inning runs, obviously very important. And it was also good to see Joe Jimenez bounce right back toss a scoreless inning. And, you saw Iglesias escape with a little bit of help from Michael Harris there in the ninth inning to nail down the save. But as we talked about this offense quite a bit, and you touched on this earlier, but the Braves doing all of this without hitting a single home run, that's mildly encouraging at the very least. And even though they left some runners out on the base paths, there were more timely hits than we have seen of late. And hopefully that can become a bit of a trend for the Braves as they move forward in this season. We're going to move forward in the Braves postcast and take a look ahead at what else is going to be going on. A whole string of interleague games are awaiting the Atlanta Braves as the Tampa Bay Rays and Detroit Tigers will be paying a visit to Truist Park. And then the Braves will hit the road and face one of the other best teams in the American League and all of baseball. We'll talk about all of that and get you set up for game one between the Braves and the Rays on Friday as the Braves postcast continues. Here on the LockedOn Braves postcast, we pride ourselves in getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. It's year-round. And you know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Get licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA and have them go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A-plus rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing it, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. That number again, 1-800-549-1000. Well, Jake, there is another American League team that awaits the Atlanta Braves as they come on home to face the Tampa Bay Rays at Truist Park. It's a 3-game series, and this, I would say, is kind of interesting because remember how both of these clubs were among the best in baseball record-wise all year long a year ago. Not quite clicking the same way as their 2023 version is also something that the Tampa Bay Rays are dealing with this year.
Yeah, they've had a lot of injuries, themselves over there. Now a lot of their starting pitching has been injured and can't really find things offensively. So it's been a little bit of a down year for the Rays. You kind of just expect it from them, and it's crazy to say if you go all the way back. You remember the Rays days where they just couldn't win anything, and now it's like it's almost expected of them to be right there in every single year. But certainly been a bit of a disappointing season for them so far.
Yeah, and one of the most powerful teams in baseball a year ago, they have a run differential this year of -62. That's not something I had necessarily on my bingo card either. Despite that, they're just 3 games under 500, so they are still competitive, but they're hanging around at the bottom of the American League East, which is not something we're used to seeing, at least not since maybe the 90s and early 2000s. But this is something that the Rays are trying to work out as they go, much like the Braves, I think, are trying to figure some things out. But Atlanta comes into this one 36-30 as they get the weekend series started. It's going to be Chris Sale in the opener, then Charlie Morton and Hurston Waldrop will also get starts this weekend. Obviously, Chris Sale has been throwing great this year. He's been helping to anchor the Braves staff. Charlie Morton, the former Ray, will face his old club. But Hurston Waldrop, his first start at Truist Park, I think that, Jake, is something to watch.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what he does in his second appearance. We saw with Spencer Schwellenbach. I feel like he's okay in his first one, got a little roughed up in his second one, and kind of settled down in his third one. So interested to see what adjustments that Hurston Waldrop can make. And he looked good in the first couple of innings in his first one, and then things just kind of unraveled on him. That control of his pitches really just got away from him. So hopefully he can kind of dial things back in. Obviously, the stuff is really good, and he has the ability to get hitters out at this level. Just got to be able to control it a little bit more and make sure to control your emotions as well. Again, his first big league start, I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. But again, can't wait to see what adjustments he makes and what he looks like back at home and against this Rays lineup.
Yeah, it should be interesting to see what Hurston Waldrop looks like. And I know he's got to be looking forward to actually getting on the home mound in front of the home crowd with all the pomp and circumstance. I'm sure the family will be on hand as well. And I did think he looked good in that first one. But as we've talked about with Spencer Schwellenbach, and I know this isn't the Hurston Waldrop show, but just a couple of thoughts on it. I think he'll start to learn where to locate some of his pitches, particularly to put big league hitters away, because it is great to have a big fastball. It's even great when you've got a put away pitch. But if you throw too many in and around the plate and counts where hitters are just looking for something close, you can, in fact, get hurt. And we saw that a little bit. We'll talk about Hurston Waldrop a little bit more later this weekend. Let's talk about Chris Sale for a moment. He has bounced right back, had that one clunker of a start against the Oakland Athletics. Looked good in his last start against the Nationals. Took a tough luck loss there, just his second of the year. Sale's 8-2. He's got a 3.01 ERA. He'll face Zach Littell, who's going to be on the mound for Tampa Bay, 2-4 with a 3.63 ERA. Chris Sale, much like we talked about with Reynaldo Lopez, they're trying to give him that extra day's rest. So has only thrown on regular or 4 days rest one time this year. They've been keeping him usually on 5, sometimes an extra day here or there. But I think that, again, to go back to it, has benefited Chris Sale, who spent a 5-year odyssey trying to get himself healthy again. And he has shown us in 2024 what a healthy Chris Sale can do.
Yeah, he's been fantastic all year for the Braves. Like you said, had a little hiccup there against the A's, but outside of that, it's just been really, really good. And I expect that to continue. And he's facing a Rays lineup. They're 28th in baseball in home runs. They're 22nd in average. And they have the 7th most strikeouts. So it seems like a pretty good matchup on paper. We know this game's not played on paper. You wouldn't have thought what happened against the A's would happen to him, but definitely appears to be a good matchup for him. And those extra days of rest, again, they're very important. And these pitchers are showing that it's not affecting them. Sometimes you don't know. Pitchers who are in a routine, as we know a lot of baseball players are, they may want to start that every 5th day, but it seems like this has been more beneficial than not for these Brave starters.
Yeah, I think it has. You mentioned some of those other stats for the Rays. They're also 25th in Major League Baseball in run score with just 266 if you're counting. The Braves are 19th now in Major League Baseball with 287 runs scored as well. So both of these teams, both of these offenses looking for consistency, looking for power. We've seen with the Braves, there's a laundry list of guys who've had a down start. You look at the Rays, you mentioned some injuries. Randy Arozarena has had a terrible start to his season, but showing some signs of life here lately. The Rays are going to have some interesting decisions to make when it comes to the trade deadline as well, because they don't really necessarily have to rebuild it, but they'll definitely retool and make some trades and send some guys to different places to restock and reset themselves for the following year. I don't think the Rays are necessarily, on the ropes in the long term, but in the near term, they may be looking to make a few deals if they can keep these guys healthy heading towards the trade deadline. And a guy like Randy Arozarena, that's going to be a pretty fascinating name, I think, when it comes to the possibilities of teams finding a slugger for the stretch run.
Yeah, I know a lot of Braves fans have been mentioning that name if we've been doing our mock trade segment here on LockedOn Braves. And, makes some sense, especially if you're getting a guy who struggled in the first half and maybe is heating back up to get back to his typical ways. I mean, he's been a 20-20 guy for 3 straight seasons now. He's been pretty consistent. So probably big things coming for him later in the season. And, he's going to help a team, some team. I think he probably does get traded. He's one of those guys that's rumored to be moved, as, the Rays don't like to pay those guys as they start to make a lot of money through arbitration. Maybe him, maybe Zach Eflin, some others. Ahmed Rosario could be a name as well. So you could see a lot of movement from this Rays team that plays in a very difficult AL East as it is. And if they slide any more in those standings, definitely could see them being very active at the trade deadline.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the one time the Rays did decide to go ahead and break open the bank and pay somebody to stick around, that guy got himself in some hot water, and we'll just leave that right there. It should be interesting to see if the Braves can kind of carry over some of this momentum, if you want to call it that, the signs of life that we saw on Sunday, a little bit of timely hitting that helped them pick up a 6-3 win over the Orioles, who are, of course, one of the best teams in baseball. Braves hitting a full 30 points higher at Truist Park than they have on the road this year. That's worth noting. Also on this homestand, not only will it be the Rays, but then the Detroit Tigers come into town on a 3-game set that begins on Monday, then the off day. And then the Braves are going to see one of the other best teams in baseball. They got the New York Yankees next weekend. A lot of time between now and then, but man, the Braves, Jake, are getting themselves a heaping helping of the American League right now.
They are, and the Yankees, I mean, the way they're playing at the moment, they're one of the best teams in baseball, if not the best team. They're right there with the Orioles. They're both, at least coming into the day's action, we're 8-2 in their last 10. And that Yankees lineup with Judge and Soto and Stanton starting to hit some home runs. It's just a very powerful lineup. They're one of the few teams that aren't struggling to hit home runs right now, both them and the Orioles. So that'd be a tough matchup. They're playing some great baseball. Could be getting Garrett Cole back here pretty soon as well.
Well, they've got an embarrassment of riches in the sluggers that you mentioned when they can send Jason Dominguez back to the minors after activating him from the 60-day IL. There'd be a lot of clubs out here ready to break that glass because that emergency has already sounded long ago as far as getting some offense. I'm sure Dominguez will factor in their plans at some point, but that is exactly how good the Yankees are at the moment. They can't even find a place for one of the great young players in the game. That's going to bring us to the end of this edition of the Braves Postcast as we get you set for the series this weekend. It's Chris Sale against Zach Littell of the Tampa Bay Rays. That starts on Friday, and we'll be with you throughout the weekend as well. So make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Sports Atlanta here on YouTube. Leave us those likes and comments. Share the show with a friend, and subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. Once again, Atlanta with a 6-3 win to end a 5-game losing streak, its longest in nearly 7 years, and, of course, avoid a sweep and come on home to get this homestand started. For Jake Mastroianni, I'm Grant McAuley. We will catch you next time. And until then, so long, everyone.